Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I can't think of a more elegant and simple way to think about both your personal brand as a founder and your company brand. So just ask yourself this. When I'm not in the room, what do people say about me? And what do people say about my company? And that's really the essence of your brand.
Welcome to Prime Venture Partners Podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs looking to build and grow their startups. Learn about uncommon strategies and common traps from makers and doers of startup ecosystem.
We're delighted to have with us Meeta Malhotra, founder of Hardcopy. Meeta's been in the startup and marketing ecosystem for a long time. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Amit. Thanks for having me.
Meeta, I would love for our listeners to hear a little bit about your journey since you've done so many interesting things.
Too many interesting things, actually. So I think my journey is just about leaping in when I see the intersect of an interesting person that I want to work with and an interesting area. So I've worked in Infosys. That was my first job. I have then been partner at a design and branding studio for 15 years. Because I'm a closet geek, I've actually built a SaaS product, exited that. And now I'm founder of the Hardcopy, which is an online publication that is focused on chronicling the exciting stuff that's happening in design, product, innovation in the Indian ecosystem.
Wonderful. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. I hope we can keep it to the time that we intended to. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about brand. I've often seen you talk about brand and building a brand, whether it's your own personal brand or your professional brand or even the brand of your company. Maybe just a little bit of what have you seen with respect to startups when it comes to building, these various brands?
Right. So I think first thing is that brand is just a hugely misunderstood word, right? When you think of, say, defining a brand positioning, people think of charts and frameworks and polygons, or on the other extreme, people think of slogans and say, the Nike brand is just do it. And both those are actually completely wrong. So I think Bezos summed it up beautifully. He said, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I can't think of a more elegant and simple way to think about both your personal brand as a founder and your company brand. So just ask yourself this. When I'm not in the room, what do people say about me? And what do people say about my company? And that's really the essence of your brand, and that's your starting point for your brand narrative.
Sounds great. Do you think people have awareness even before they decide to go invest into, I want to build a brand or whatever, of what their brand stands for?
I think people are often surprised because, all of us are human beings and we view ourselves and our companies through this lens. We're too close to it. And I think that a really good way to start even with your brand, right, before you employ consultants or marketers or anybody, is just ask your 5 customers or your 10 customers, what do you think of this company? Listen to the words they use, and I'm pretty sure that you'll see a pattern emerging. And that's really where your brand positioning is. It's not what you're thinking. Similar sort of framework applies to your personal brand. Get 10 people who know you, varying degrees of closeness, and ask them to say 5 things that describe you. Again, you'll see a pattern emerging, and that is what people think of you. That's your brand narrative currently.
And that seems like a very simple, brain-dead thing to do. And yet I don't think very many people necessarily do it, right?
No, they're actually, in my experience, I think a lot of people, but startups particularly, are frightened of this whole idea of brand building. It seems like this large, expensive, resource-intensive thing to do, which is best pushed out till they have more money or a larger team or more resources. And that's not the right way to think about it.
Absolutely. And now with the absolute proliferation of social media, right? Whether it is Twitter, LinkedIn, etc., it's actually not that expensive to build a brand. And I'm not talking TV campaigns and all that. That you could defer for when you have a lot more money.
Right.
But just what is it that you stand for?
Exactly. So there are 2 steps to that, right? And while we can sit and say that why don't you start a Twitter account? And I'm speaking from personal experience. So when I tell founders, why don't you tweet or why don't you blog, or things that maybe seem very easy to us are perhaps not that simple for a founder to start with, right? And I've observed this over the last few years, and a founder is juggling with a lot of stuff. And to ask him to tweet, ask him to blog, if it doesn't come naturally to him, is a hard thing to do. But I still think that you need to sit down, you need to focus on this and think about how you're going to get your brand narrative out. Because if you don't, and here's the important thing, if you don't shape the narrative, somebody is doing it. So whether you are tweeting or not, somebody is tweeting about you.
Absolutely. So going back to, the kind of reticence of founders to do this, one, of course, is time. Second, maybe you're saying sort of personal interest or lack thereof. Are there some other reasons why people don't go out there and do that? Maybe people are vulnerable. Maybe there's something else, right? And are there tips and tricks to sort of overcome that?
There are two things, right? I think you have a set of founders who don't think this is important enough because they are so occupied with building the business, and, all respect to them. But I just want to say that it will get harder if you don't control it now. If you think that you can put off building your brand and take it up after your next fundraise or your next team hire, you're making it harder for yourself. You need to start today. How much effort you put into it you can calibrate that depending on at what stage you are, but you need to start today. That's number one. Number two, I think I've met a lot of founders who are actually sold on the idea. They understand the importance of brand building, but I think they are afraid of being judged. And that's very natural. I mean, as a founder, you are being judged and called out every day on 100 things. Do you really want to add one more to the pile? So what I would say in answer to your question about what can they do about it, I would say that anything you put out, right? Anything you say about your brand or the ecosystem to which your brand belongs, if it's adding value for even one person, if one person reads what you have said and takes away something from it, and it can be something to do with the industry that you're in, it can be a learning he or she has had from what you've written, then you have done immense service to the ecosystem, right? And I think that you have to stop worrying about the stuff that's not important, which is the polish or the articulation or the grammar nobody cares about that stuff. If you're adding value, you're saying something that's important, then people will want to read it.
Absolutely. One of the things we tell our founders is don't just think about your company or your professional brand. Think about the industry that you're in. Think about the issues of that industry. Think about the customers of that industry and talk about that, right? Because people want to hear a genuine, authentic point of view from somebody who's in the field. Completely. Dealing with that rather than, no disrespect to journalists or whatever, because you are living that every day, right? So that is so much more valuable than any sort of second or third party kind of narrative.
Absolutely. I mean, and India is still we're still maturing. The startup ecosystem is still maturing here. I mean, we've come a long way. But one of the reasons I started the hard copy was because there's just not enough of what you're talking about. There are not enough first-hand narratives about how you took brands or, from 0 to 1, what you did with the design, what you did with the product. And people don't want to hear it from a third party. They want to hear it from the company or the founder. And there isn't enough of that happening. If you're a founder, I would say to you, think back to when you were starting the company. Were you not on the internet looking for, the smallest sort of nugget you could find, something that would help you, something that you could glean some insight from? Well, there are 1,000 people out there just like that. And some of them are your customers. Many of them are your customers.
Absolutely. On the practical side, both on the, you had 2 points, right? One is that they don't perceive it to be important.
Right.
And, any kind of tips in terms of tools or where to get started. Let's say you are one who believes it's important, but just want to start. So one is you said, hey, don't give a damn, right? Just start, be authentic, add value.
Yeah.
Are there like tips, tricks, maybe some tools or some safe spaces to start in? How do you start out?
Well, I think so, if we're really talking about the process of brand building, right? And so the founders usually have complete clarity on this. There is sometimes a delta between what's in the founder's head and how they're able to articulate it to the outside world. So I would say spend a little bit of time on that with your team. Sit down, with some coffee or beer or whatever, and actually think about distilling what your brand stands for, right? And that is an important exercise. And honestly, at an early stage, you don't need a consultant to come in and help you, right? I mean, if
Sure.
you have somebody to bounce ideas off, great, but otherwise you can do it yourself. And I say, think of 3 things, right? Think of what you stand for as a founder. Think of what your company, what the space that you are building and what it means to your customer. And then think about the competitive landscape. If you can triangulate these 3, you can arrive at a proposition for your brand. Once you've done that, you can go out and talk about it. And a lot of this is very, it's second nature to founders. All the founders that I've worked with, I always tell them, you already know what your brand stands for. I'm just going to help you maybe clear away the clouds.
Sure. So very interesting. You said your company and the competitive landscape.
Yes.
But specifically, you didn't say customers. So, or prospects. What do they care about? So let's say I was a vernacular language startup and my customers were customers in tier 2, tier 3 cities, first time on the internet, Wouldn't I want to know what is their worldview? And that is an aspirational thing. That obviously is not what my brand stands for. But I'm
Correct.
saying these are the people I'm serving.
Right.
So what would they care for? And am I able to give that or not? Right.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that when I talked about the company, that's what I meant. I mean,
Okay.
So I'm saying that when it's about you, what you want to accomplish, because as a founder at this stage, and as you grow, that recedes. Because then it's not about you alone, it's about the company. But when I'm talking about the company, it is really about the company and what you set it up to serve or who you set it up to serve. So your customers become a very big part of that.
Right. So often we find people get very confused with trying to pitch and brand and talk about features and products and widgets and I do this and that and for this market and that thing. It's not really relevant, right? It's who are you serving? What is the benefit? Why should they care? What is their worldview? Often that is sort of left out.
And what is your part in their world? So I think that again is a weak link for me in my experience, right? So I've seen startups that will do this exercise. So they say, okay, this is what the founder's vision is. This is what we set this company up. These are the people we set this company up to serve. And here's the competitive landscape. But when you're talking about the people you set up to serve, you're assuming that they're interested in you. That's sometimes a very, very false assumption.
That's correct.
So what is your part in their world and why should they care and pick you over the other 10 options that they have is something you need to think about.
Absolutely. Very interesting. How do you know that, let's say you buy into all this and you start focusing, you start adding value to the ecosystem, building a little bit of the brand. How do you know it's working? How do you know you're making progress? So, I listen to this podcast and I'm excited. I'm going to start working on this. 6 months later,
Right.
I want to do a dipstick and see, did I make progress? How would I know?
So I think there's, again, 2 aspects to this, right? There's a sort of a qualitative aspect. And I think that you will sense that. You will sense a little more engagement. You will sense people talking about it. I think you will sense that, particularly if you're out there on social media or blogging or going to events. It doesn't only have to be social media. So this is something I want to, again, emphasize. You don't have to have a massive Twitter following as evidence that you are talking about your brand. I see people agonizing about it and you can have 0. You don't even need to be on Twitter, Frank, but you need to be somewhere. And that could be an event. It could be a physical event and that's fine, right? But I think that when you are speaking about your brand, you need to sort of stay focused on this whole, whether it's, in an event or whether it's on Twitter, you need to stay focused on this single message. And that's really the important thing.
Got it. So you'll start getting some inbound, some qualitative, some
You'll
feedback.
start getting, and I think that the quantitative measure for me is organic, right? I mean, that's key. And I've seen it happen in every case. If you see organic, whatever rising, whether it's traffic, whether it's inquiries, whether it's anything, you will know that you are creating a tiny little ripple and that's only going to be magnified.
Sure.
So we used to have when I was running the studio, and a lot of people ask me this, what are the metrics you set up for successful exit, right? I'm talking about studio acquisitions. And to me, a metric that I had set up to monitor was inbound inquiries. And I said, it doesn't, there's revenue, profit, blah, 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 blah. But if we don't get so many calls a week, that means we're not brand building. Why are people not seeking us out? And I think that is something that I would advocate.
Absolutely. Now, getting a little bit to a later stage company, and now you have, let's say, done a lot of fundraising, or you've got a lot of customer traction, maybe some product market fit, and you genuinely want to go invest with bigger bucks behind this, or maybe even hire a
TV ad.
yeah, even well before the TV ad, but perhaps TV ad, hire a CMO, hire whoever. What's in the next phase? How should one think about it, right? You're past the early stages, you got some early product market fit.
Right.
Now you really want to build a brand, right? That is going to have brand recall, brand perception. Like, what is the path? Again, still think like Series B startup, not quite sponsoring an IPL team yet.
Correct. Yeah. So I would say, again, and because I really believe in this whole frugal marketing thing, right? I think that too many dollars have been wasted on silly vanity metrics. So I would say it doesn't matter where you are. The first step is to know whether, without spending $1, have you really maximized your branding and marketing? I mean, has your product done everything that it could? So really start there, because let's say that if you've raised a Series B, I'm assuming that what happens with that is that your product team becomes, you more mature. And I would say your marketing should start there. Is your product fully equipped to convert, to bring in people? Are you doing everything you can if you didn't have to spend any money? Once you've sorted that piece out, then go to the next step of maybe having a marketing budget. But everywhere, and this is a very contentious thing, people talk about the ROI of marketing, and marketers push back and say there is no ROI on marketing. But I would say when you start with some really clear objectives. So if you say that, listen, we just want to raise brand awareness, that's one, right? We're not converting this to sales. We're not linking the two. We're saying that in the first phase, just more people should know about us. Even then, create some kind of dashboard, because you can't just start with saying that, okay, we'll spend this money and we'll see what happens. So even then, start with a dashboard, a hypothesis of where brand awareness is today, then go out and try a few things. And what those things are very specific to you, your industry, where your customers are.
Very helpful. So switching gears, one of my other pet peeves in some sense, a lot of B2B startups, right? Whether you yourself used to run a SaaS company, SaaS companies, enterprise companies, whatever. Say, we absolutely don't need marketing. That's for the B2C people. Right? And it sort of drives me a little bit mad. What are your thoughts with respect to B2B in particular?
So, again, this is, like you said, Amit, this is a question I've got asked a lot as well, right? Why do we need marketing in B2B? And this is what I say. So I say, so when your salespeople go to sell, are they selling to like some alien or a robot so the person that, they're not selling to a human being?
In which case, maybe you don't need marketing.
Then you don't need marketing.
Yeah. Then we need AI bots for marketing.
Perfect.
That's different.
If you're the day you need to address your sales pitch to an AI bot, sack your marketer. Right? But until you are selling to a human being, again, it's the same thing. It's not rocket science. He has some perception of your company and your brand. And your
industry.
And your industry.
And other customers. Competitors,
absolutely,
right?
Completely. And if you're not shaping that through marketing, then forget it. I mean,
Right. Sounds great. Maybe a little bit about, since you spent many years in design,
right?
Switching, gears again. What are some of those influences that have led on to, latter career as a marketeer, as helping other folks, and now running hard copy, right? What are some of the things you sort of learned and remember from the design days that are still so relevant in this new world?
So, I'm not a designer. I'm what they would call a suit in the marketing, in the design world. Sort of, we were scoffed at until they realized how much, the fact that we were the ones bringing in the money. So, but my business partner, who was also my mentor, and at the studio, and I once asked, I said, I'm surrounded by designers, and what do I need to do? Like, is there a course I can do? Because I was also a very check the box kind of person. And shall I go enroll at an online course? Should I? And she said, there's only one thing you need to do. And I this is advice that I've carried through my life and would give to anyone who asks me, which is train your eye. There is no book or course, short term that can teach you what is good design and what is bad design. You have to, so I would say, educate yourself. And when I say educate yourself, it's not by looking at apps. It is by going to art shows. It is by studying the work of the greatest designers in the world. It is by going out whenever there is something to see, to theater. That is when you educate yourself about the world, you will slowly begin to understand what works and what doesn't work in the design world.
Very fascinating. Often think that about product management, which is an area I've spent many, many years on. And
Right.
you're always saying, always keep questioning, how can this be better?
Exactly.
And as soon as you get into that mindset, it doesn't matter whether you're doing B2B or B2C or designing chairs or
Absolutely.
running an art gallery. You
No.
keep asking, how can this be better?
Absolutely. And people get stuck with things like form factor.
Yeah.
And I mean, none of that matters, really. If you have an innate sense of what is good and what is. And again, it's interesting you asked this question. I'd love to add this here because we're at a very interesting inflection point in the Indian design world, right? So the world that I came from in the 2000s, we were driven by a very Western influence on design. So the Dieterams and the Bauhausian sort of schools of thought where everything should be very clean and uncluttered, and that's good design. And everything that was cluttered and loud and noisy was bad design. And now we have come full circle. We're at least in the digital world, we're now standing at a point where we're seeing that those principles don't necessarily apply, because the next billion that are coming online, their design paradigm is completely different. It's vertical, for one, to start with.
What do you mean by that? What is vertical?
In the sense that mobile phone is their first entry point. We grew up with rectangular screens. Like, I'm talking about such a basic design principle, right? And we therefore think in windows. And we like to clean up windows and have white space on either side and all of that. That's being tossed out of the window as we speak. So again, the same advice, which was go out, educate yourself, train your eye, applies just as much to this world. If you're designing for people whose first point of entry is the mobile phone, go out, educate yourself about them and their world.
It's very interesting. We're recording this on a podcast, and now I think more than 50% of searches on Google are now voice searches.
Absolutely.
So maybe the next generation, right, that is born on the internet now or in the last 10 years,
Yeah.
there's going to be so much more on voice.
Absolutely.
And whether it is bots or human beings or hybrid thereof.
Correct.
So you'll have to design for the voice world, right? You're going to ask Alexa this and Google that.
Completely.
And not even going to type. So you're not even listening back to a text format response, even if
Correct.
it's on a phone. You're hearing the response. So that better make sense to you.
Exactly. I mean, it's voice now. Who knows what it's, your human body is interface next. So it's very hard to predict. But I think if your fundamentals of design are in place and solid, then you're not going to be thrown off guard by changes in form factor. Then it's a question of somebody I interviewed for the hard copy put it really well. He said that after World War II, there were plastics. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to know how to make plastics, but you definitely need to know how to work with them.
Absolutely. I think Gary Kasparov has this beautiful TED talk where he talks about don't be afraid of AI.
Exactly.
Learn to work with AI.
Completely.
He's saying you had this paranoia against AI. And this is a talk like 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
And so it's pretty prescient, obviously, for his, even in his later years, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was the guy who came up with the idea of centaurs, right? Augmented human beings. And we just ran a story on what are centaur designers? What could be centaur designers? And it would be really interesting because, while the popular narrative is about, somebody will come and they'll be able to design and you'll be out of a job, I think that's just never going to happen. I think it's much more that the mundane will get taken over by AI. And
Absolutely.
Therefore, that augmented designer will be far more powerful than we are today, we hope.
So I love this train your eye and your ear. I think that is definitely one of my top takeaways from this podcast. So wonderful, Meeta. It was so great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amit.
We'd love for you to share some books. Maybe we'll include that in the podcast notes.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.